Do you?
Soccer squares.
It's a very old-fashioned thing.
Yeah, but it's come back now.
Is it?
It's come back.
Wow.
I'm trying to bring it back.
And have you ever wondered why we need to stand while it's out?
Those are good questions. Do you have the same questions?
Come join us on the Ark.
Why do we show reverence in this way?
The highest point of the person is his mind. I'm bringing all of that in humility before the Lord.
Is there a reason we fast 9 hours before the liturgy?
I noticed that you did another matanya after you opened the veil. Why is that?
So, Abuna, why do you walk around with the censer?
Abuna, why do we use the altar?
Why do you take the middle piece and then you put it in the blood?
Hi, and I'm Mina Ibrahim from your CYC studios in Sydney, and welcome to Ask. What is Ask, you say? Ask stands for ask, seek, knock, where you ask the questions and we'll answer it for you right here, live on the show. We have topics like IVF and the church's stance on it, human conditioning, social media and its dangers, purity within a marriage. We aim to bring you controversial and taboo topics and discussions that will not happen in your regular youth meetings. So remember to tune in to the show Thursdays 8 p.m. Sydney time and get involved. And remember, you'll always remain anonymous.
This show is all about relatable subjects and topics between the servants and the youth of the church.
The servants and the teachers aren't motivating, or they're just doing it because somebody called them to.
If you want to do something, imagine God is sitting right next to you. Would you still do that or not?
What kind of opportunities do you feel that the church has given you?
When you volunteer, you learn to love it. You're doing something that you like. Obviously, it makes you happier.
Good evening and welcome to CYC News for today.
I'm Susie Michael.
Angie Victor.
Andrea Botros.
Anastasia Attia. International Orthodox news in Australia, Canada, Egypt and France.
Celebrating 20 years of the first Coptic school in New South Wales, Australia.
The Coptic Orthodox Church celebrates the enthronement of Jerusalem's 22nd bishop.
Stay tuned for more Christian content on CYC. I'm Leanne Gabriel.
And I'm Mark Gabriel from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia.
CYC Christian Youth Channel.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Ask on CYC. So they say a perfect marriage does not exist, but what it does consist of two imperfect people working at it and making it work. And that's what tonight's show is about. And because of our imperfection and our impurities, we need to learn and we need to grow. So how do we do that? And how do we do that through the church's guidance? We need to read, we need to ask questions. And that's why we give you tonight's live show where you get involved, ask questions. And tonight's topic is about two become one, and it's under the Orthodox Christian Guide to Engagement and Marriage. It's a book. It's out there for you to read. And we're going to talk tonight about the book. Just a reminder, our phone number is 0416 551 292. Please ask your questions tonight to get the answers that you're looking for. Now let me introduce you to tonight's guest. We have Father Antonius Kaldas. We have Irini Attia, who is a Christian counsellor and also a school counsellor. Welcome to Ask.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mina.
Pleasure having you on Ask. This is your second time, and Irini, this is also your second time on Ask. Just so we can, the audience can get familiar. Father, before you became a priest, what was your background?
Well, I worked a bit as a doctor here and there, ended up doing palliative care, and then got called to the priesthood. That was a long time ago. It was last century, actually, so it's quite a while.
Okay. Irini, I know I mentioned your title in the intro, but tell us more about yourself and your background.
So my background didn't actually start in counselling. I was a business analyst for quite a bit of time, and then I studied counselling about 10 years ago now, and worked at the Coptic school as a school counsellor for about 7 years, and as well as having my own private practice and working as a counsellor in that as well. So yeah, I've worn a few hats along the way.
Okay. So tonight's show is about the book, The Two Become One, an Orthodox Christian Guide to Engagement and Marriage. And you both are the co-authors of this book. Wonderful to have such a literature in our community for the young people out there to read and learn and understand. So I know there's been several seminars held over the years, relationship seminars. Tell us a bit more about these seminars and the intended audience for these seminars.
So yes, you're right, the relationship seminars have been running for about 9 years now, and they usually run twice a year. And they're open to everyone. They're open to people who are pre-engaged, engaged, married, we've had, or single for that matter. So we've had people attend the seminar in different stages of their life and different stages of their relationships, and even before they enter into relationships. And it's aimed at equipping people with some tools and some strategies, and just opening up conversations about different areas of relationships that we don't normally get to talk about, like personalities, like the way we communicate, the differences between men and women. We discuss intimacy. So we've discussed a range of subjects, and it's set up in a way that gives people the opportunity to either reflect on those subjects if they attend alone, or if they're attending with their fiancé or someone they're getting to know, or even their husband or wife. They have time as well to go through those subjects and discuss them at greater lengths together.
Sure. And the content of these seminars, are they for a married lifestyle?
Yeah, so we are predominantly speaking about marital relationships, but it, like all things, it brings into the conversation a variety of topics and a lot of things that apply across all relationships. So the way we speak and our ideas about other people's intentions towards us, and all those kind of concepts are applicable across all relationships, not just marital ones. But yes, of course, the focus is the marital relationships and how we best enter into those relationships and maintain them if we're already there.
Okay, so let's now take a look at the book. So The Two Become One, an Orthodox Christian Guide to Engagement and Marriage. So what instigated the decision for you both to write this book?
Well, basically pastoral need, I think, was the main reason. So Irini's been doing these seminars for quite some years now. And of course, all the parish priests meet with young couples before they're getting married and sit and talk to them and give them spiritual advice and so on. And I think many of us just felt it would be good to have a lot of that stuff actually written down, so that rather than have to spend 6 sessions, me as a priest at least, talking to people and saying things and probably forgetting things that I should have said and saying things that can be misunderstood, it's actually much better to have it written down so people can go home and read it, and then you come and discuss what they've read. And that way also they can kind of highlight the bits that really matter to them and the things that are more relevant, because not everything will be relevant to every couple. Yeah.
We're going to have actually the cover of the book up on the screen so the audience can see it. So who published the book, and what was the process in getting the book published?
So yeah, the publisher is Ancient Faith Publishing, and the process basically involved Abuna and myself sending just the original manuscript, I guess that's what you refer to it as, to them, and there was a review process, and then they accepted that, and after we did a few edits, it was they made the decision to publish it in a nutshell. I'm sure Abuna can elaborate a bit more on that process, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons we chose something like Ancient Faith is that they're wonderful with their podcasts. I know that many people in the Coptic Church love the podcasts and many of the other books that they write. But it was also an opportunity to start to break down barriers a little bit between the different Orthodox families, and to kind of, we see so many of our young Coptic people today are marrying people from outside the Coptic Church. And often they are Orthodox, they are Greek or Russian or something like that. So this was kind of a way to make them feel a little bit more comfortable from a grassroots level. So we included in the book at the end actually as a set of the rites of the Coptic wedding ceremony, but also the Eastern Orthodox, the Greek wedding ceremony. And it's incredible how similar they are, and how much overlap there is, and how much the basic idea of them and the direction of them is pretty much the same. So we're hoping that this is kind of one little step towards opening up the dialogue and the communication and the interaction between all the Orthodox families.
Just a reminder to our audience members, please, the phone number is 0416 551 292. Please send in your questions and you get them answered on tonight's live show, whether you're single, engaged or married. If you have a question, about the book, send us a text or give us a call and speak to our guest on tonight's show. And we're going to bring up the front page of the book for you all to see, and up on the screen right now. So I really like the name, and I'm interested how the name came about.
I think it was Irini's idea.
Yeah, look, I was a suggestion. I didn't actually anticipate that it would turn out to be the actual name, but I just love that concept that we hold on to so dearly, and our faith that when two people are joined, they do become one, and they're one in many essences and in many meanings of the word. So I think it just encapsulates that relationship, that marital bond, in a short, I think, concise way, and I think it just reflects a lot of our faith and what we work towards as well in a marital relationships, and that is to truly be united, to truly be one. I think when we enter into a marriage with that in mind, that we are two people becoming one, then it can become a great motivator to get through a lot of the difficult stuff that comes up with marriage, I guess. But yeah.
And the choice of image on the front page of the two candles in one flower piece.
Yeah, I think that was probably Abuna had more influence on
No,
that.
That was actually the publishers.
Oh, the publisher, yes.
Yeah, they gave us a couple of options, and I think that's the one they ended up going with. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It is very nice.
Okay. So let's look through the chapters, because I flicked through and looked at the chapters, and wow, what a read. Like big headings, strong topics. So let's tackle a few of the chapters and see how significant and important they are to a life of a married couple or engaged couple.
Sure. Well, we kind of go through more or less chronologically in order of time. So we begin with what the single person can do to prepare for the day when they will think of getting married and finding a partner and so on. I think we call that chapter marriageability. The idea that people are often very worried about the characteristics of the person they're looking for, but they don't give as much thought to their own characteristics and what they're going to be giving and what they're going to be putting into the relationship. And obviously that's not something like, when you decide to look for a partner, you're suddenly going to be this wonderful, holy, saintly person who's going to be terrific and easy to get along with. You've got to start with that right from the beginning. So we discuss some of those issues, and then we go into the engagement period where we think about what the engagement is for, the fact that it's a kind of a trial period where you get to know the other person. You're really trying to work out whether you're going to be compatible with one another or not. We discuss some issues around how to make a decision. Some people find that quite difficult. They're very uncertain about whether to proceed or not, in some ways to get through that. And then we actually look at the purpose of marriage itself, kind of like what Irini was saying about the title a little bit earlier, that it's basically about two becoming one. But we also look at the spiritual ramifications of that. One of the things I love about the title is it doesn't just apply to marriage, but it applies to our relationship with God. Right? Jesus said, I in them and them in me. So our Christianity is about becoming one with God. And so when we look at marriage through that lens, we see it as an opportunity to learn what it means to put the ego aside and my selfish needs aside, and to actually give my life to another who is concrete and visible in front of me, through which I learn how to do exactly the same thing, but maybe even more so in my relationship with God. Then the book gets into really nitty-gritty practical stuff. And I might leave Irini to talk about those bits because it's much more down her line of expertise.
Yeah, I think we then start to talk about the actual issues that come up in relationships, and again the way we communicate and our perception about the other person's intentions towards us. And then we discuss some of the more difficult issues, things like abuse and abuse cycles, and how to identify that early, and how to go about best treating those situations. And then actually the book ends with this beautiful description of the Coptic marriage rite and the Greek Orthodox marriage rite, and compares and contrasts the two. And Abuna's put a lot of effort into that, and it really highlights to us that a lot of the times that we go and we attend wedding ceremonies and we just kind of sit back and we listen, and the depth of the meaning and the symbolism and the richness of the content of those rituals and those rites we kind of miss in the glamour of what's happening around it. So it's really good to, I think, have that and be able to read through it and to reflect on it.
Yeah. So one of the chapters is about sexuality, and I know this is a big taboo topic, but what's the necessary of understanding the importance of sexuality within a marriage?
Yeah, there is a section about sexuality, and we talk about how, what that means in the context of marriage, and the importance of understanding what the role that sexuality plays in marriage, and the sexual intimacy between a husband and a wife, and the fact that that is a pure thing, and that is something that is ordained by God, and yes, we discuss that at some lengths in the book. Yeah,
okay.
I'm sure Buna might have some more to add to that as well.
Yeah, and once again, we've kind of, I think in the Western world, after going through like the Victorian age where everything was very prim and proper and so on, we've kind of lost the comfortableness of talking about things like that. But when you actually go back to the Bible, when you look at particularly the Old Testament, you think of something like the Song of Songs, right? Song of Solomon, which uses very vivid intimacy kind of images to describe the relationship between humans and God. And I think that's the meaning of sexuality in marriage. It's not just something you do for fun or for pleasure or something like that. It actually is a spiritual experience. So I don't know if we've tried to capture that a little bit in the discussion in the book.
Okay. I actually got a few questions that just came in from an audience member. I just want to encourage the audience members, please, the phone number is 0416 551 292. This is your opportunity to ask a question on live show, whether it's a text or a phone call. Give us a call and we'll answer it for you. So the first question that just came in says, does the book discuss the issues of my partner is not the same person I married?
Yes, I think we do discuss that. We talk about personalities, and we talk about how our personalities differ, and how what different personalities look like in the context of marriage. And we also talk about The fact that sometimes people do change and they grow, and we all change, and the process of that happening, and what that means again in the context of marriage, and that to expect that I'm going to marry someone today and they're going to be exactly the same 20 years from now is a little bit unrealistic. That we need to approach marriage with the understanding that there may be some changes, and actually it's more than likely that the person will change to some extent, as we will change as we grow. But the goal is that we go through those changes together, and they draw us eventually closer to one another.
Okay. Next question that's come in, they're saying, is there such thing as soulmates? Is there really one person out there for me?
That I think everyone has got a very interesting view on that. Yeah.
Irini's just talking about how people change. I've actually changed my mind on this question. I think many years ago, I kind of probably thought there was just that one person that everybody has to find. God has this very specific plan for each and every person, and obviously that raises a lot of anxiety, doesn't it? Because what if I don't find that one person? Right, that's it, my life is going to be a disaster. I think I've come to realise, in experience and with discussion with many people, including Irini, I think we had this discussion at some stage as we were writing, that probably that's not the case. I think there are some people in this world for whom there could be 10,000 different possible people they could marry, and they would have a beautiful, happy, lovely marriage with those people. I think there are some people in this world for whom the number of people they could be happily married to is 0. And they probably shouldn't get married at all because, they're very selfish, they're very self-centered, they don't really want to give to the other person at all those kinds of things. And you've got everything in between, probably. So I think in the book what we've tried to say is that it's good to do your due diligence and do your best to find someone who is highly compatible with you. But I think you shouldn't expect that there is just that one person that you should marry. And of course, once you've made your decision and you've committed to someone, then that question is no longer relevant, right? Now the only thing that matters is, how can I give to this marriage? How can I contribute to it? How can I make it work, even in the face of difficulties, even in the face of hardships and problems and disagreements, right? Now that I'm committed, don't think about, maybe if I had married so-and-so, then I wouldn't be in this problem. No, you don't think about that at all. I think that's a very dangerous thing.
Okay, so the next question that's come in, they're saying, can this book be used for counselling marriage?
I think we just have to be a little bit careful with that. In a lot of times when a couple need counsel and they need to sit down and have conversation about their relationships, it's very personal and it's very much about what they're going through as a couple. And although the book is a great resource in terms of having a holistic view of what marriage looks like and the issues that we can tackle and how we can go about tackling them, I don't think we can replace that need for at certain times sitting down with someone and talking through whatever issues that we're going through, because there are no two couples that go through exactly the same issues in exactly the same ways. So I think it can work very well hand in hand with counselling a couple, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that it would replace the need to talk to anyone when we go through issues in relationships. I think that we wouldn't necessarily say that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we've got another question that's come in. They're saying, is there such thing as love at first sight?
Well, if you believe television reality shows, there is. Look, I think what they're talking about is not really love. It's something more like infatuation or, some kind of a strong adrenaline rush or something like that, which as a Christian we would not call love, right? You might call it other things, but it's not love. I think the kind of real love that makes a marriage work is something that takes time and develops through experience and sharing experiences together and working through issues together, surviving things together. It's much more like a slow burn, than a huge bonfire. I don't know if Irini would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things we also talk about in the book are the stages of relationships, and that all relationships go through a number of stages, and most relationships in the first instance go through this stage called romance, where we're a little bit colourblind and focused, and have got just tunnel vision about this other person that we have these strong emotions towards, which is great because it's a good place for relationships to start. It's where we build memories and where that attraction comes in. But for a relationship to last and for it to be able to maintain the longevity of marriage, it needs to go through other stages as well. So it needs to go through power struggles, it needs to go through stability, it needs to go through that desire to commit and that commitment to the relationship and to the other person. So I think there is certainly attraction at first sight, but for it to be a long-lasting relationship, it needs to have a lot more than just that initial romance phase that a lot of relationships kind of begin at.
So I think that's a very important note. So how can that romance, can we at all bring it back into other stages of the relationship?
Well, it's not a stage that's meant to be finite. It's not meant to be that we begin the romance stage at, in June and it ends in August. It's more along the lines of that romance initial, influx of emotion, and we feel very strongly about the other person, usually is short-lived until we come to the realization that I actually appreciate this person, I value this person for who they are, and I choose to be with this person, not just because I've got rosy-coloured glasses on or I'm looking at tunnel vision. I'm actually seeing the person holistically. But that doesn't mean to say that the romantic aspects of that stage are meant to phase away. We certainly need them throughout the lifespan of a relationship. And there are lots of different ways that we express romance and emotion in relationships, and we really need to get to know the person that we're married to or that we're engaged to find out how they perceive romance and what are the best forms of expression of romance is for them, whether it's gifts or whether it's time or whether it's conversation. But it's not something that's meant to end at a certain point.
Okay. Yeah. I know that there is a bit of focus on the engagement period, and coming from a culture where the engagement period is not focused on at all, and sometimes it could last a month or 2 months. So how come there's been a lot of thought and efforts being put into writing on the engagement period?
I think marriage is such an important thing in our lives, and it plays such a big role. That the period leading up to it is also deserving of a lot of attention and thinking and time and energy and so on. So again, when I was first ordained a priest last century, and I was in a very traditional parish, so basically, girls and boys didn't talk to each other alone until they had a ring on their finger, right? And it was expected that you had to bring your family to visit the girl's family, and they would formally ask if they could start to get to know each other and all those kinds of things. Today, I think in most places in the Western world, and probably in Egypt also, from what I hear, the cultural traditions have changed, and nowadays couples seem to know each other pretty well before they get to the stage of saying we want to have an engagement or we want to exchange rings or something like that. And I don't see that as a necessarily bad thing. I don't think it really matters what you call it, but there should be a period where two people have a chance to get to know each other as they really are. And I don't think that's going to happen in a month. Right? That's not enough time. It's easy to put on an act in a month. I need to get to see the person in lots of different circumstances. I need to see them with their workmates, with their church friends, with their family. I need to see how they deal with their siblings, because that probably is going to give me an idea of how they're going to deal with me and with their parents and so on. We need to go through those stages that Irini describes in the book. We need to have time to do that. You can't sort of artificially manufacture them. You've got to give them time to happen. So I think that period is very important, and it probably varies for different couples. Some people work it out very quickly, other people need a longer time to work it out, but it is important that they give it whatever time it needs to be done properly.
Sure. We got another question that's just come in from the audience member. They're asking, how do I know it's love and not lust?
Look, the simple answer is lust is a very self-centered thing, whereas love is a very other person-centered thing. So if it's about how this makes me feel, then there's a good chance that's probably lust. If it's about how I want to make the other person feel, and I really genuinely care about them with no ulterior motives, nothing I want to get from it, then I think you're on safer ground, that it's the kind of Christian love that we're talking about that makes a good marriage.
Okay. We've got another question that's come in, and I encourage the audience members to keep asking questions. This is your opportunity. The phone number is 0416 551 292. Please continue your questions. So the question that's come in, they're asking, I can't choose between two women. One I'm emotionally caught up with, the other I get along with on an intellectual level. Please help.
Sounds like a counselling question to me.
It's a difficult one to answer, but I think it's important to assess what marriage actually means to me, and what it is that I'm entering into. And it's important to make these decisions. Obviously, there's a spiritual component, there's an emotional component, and there's an intellectual component. And there's a social component, and there's a family. There's many aspects that fall together and form a marital relationship. And I think it can be a difficult decision when someone's in that predicament where they're trying to navigate and find out who is most suited to me, or who is a most suitable lifelong partner. And I think it's important to look at it that way, important to enter into a marriage and into the prospect of a marriage, not thinking about the short term, but really thinking about the long term. And it's also important to make sure that we have that emotional component as well, because like I was saying earlier, when we were talking about stages of relationship, that romance stage has a purpose, and there is a point of that. And because we need that emotional attraction and that emotional connection to also be there. The intellectual alone is not enough, the social alone is not enough, and even the emotional alone sometimes is not enough. So we really need to look at it in a holistic way, rather than trying to just pinpoint one or two areas that I think might be compatible, even though that word is probably not the most ideal of words, but in this setting, I guess we could use it. But yeah, and even that compatibility is something that's very difficult to gauge. I don't know if there is such a thing as compatibility. As Abuna was saying earlier, one person may be, it's possible for them to marry many people, or one of many people, and be happy with that person. And for some people, they're not as it's easy for them to marry as many people. It's difficult for them because they have certain personalities or certain traits that would limit the number of people with whom they could have a healthy marriage. So I think it's important to look at it that way, like holistically, rather than just individual components. But I'm not sure if Abuna has anything to add to that.
Yeah, not really. Just maybe the only thing I'd sort of building on what you were just saying is maybe that the person asking the question needs to ask, given their own personality, what matters the most to them. You know, if they're a very emotionally oriented person, then maybe they need to give that a higher weighting in their thinking. If they're more interested in having interesting discussions with someone for the next 50 years, then maybe they need to do that.
I wonder if we tackle it from a religious point of view, should we also look at traits where this person is going to help me get to salvation?
Of course, yes. Of course, I'm not going to give any other answer than that, but actually it is very true. As we were saying earlier, one of the purposes of marriage, perhaps really the ultimate reason marriage exists, is to teach me how to relate to God, to teach me how to find a union with God. So definitely I think we should look for partners who will share with us that journey, and whom we can encourage and who can encourage us. And there's that lovely verse in Ecclesiastes that if one falls, then blessed is the one who has someone to pick them up. And today that might be me who falls and I need my wife to pick me up, and tomorrow she may be the one who falls and needs me to pick her up.
Okay. So we got a question that's come in, and this is actually a question that's most commonly asked around youth these days. What is the ideal age difference between partners, including female being older?
I'm not sure that there's any statistics on Sabuna has researched any. I personally haven't. So I'm not sure if there's any research that sets a certain age difference. Just from a personal experience and from counselling experience, usually anything within that 5-year range is usually healthy. Beyond that, when we're looking at an age gap of 10, 15 years, it can become quite problematic. Sometimes not early in the relationship, say when someone is 20 and the other person is 30, or 25 and 35, but further down when someone is, say, 45 and the other person's 55 or 60 even. That's where the gap seems to widen a bit more. Because I think it's important to always keep in mind that marriage is a lifelong journey. So I want to be able to enter into that journey with someone with whom we're going to be entering into life stages at relatively similar times. Not necessarily the same times, but at least close to one another. So yeah, generally anything within that 5-year range from personal experience in the counselling room, that's where things have seemed to form a healthy balance. Beyond that, so when we're looking at 10 to 15-year age gaps, that's where some of those issues later on in relationships tend to come up. But I'd be very curious to hear what.
When you say 10 to 15, are you talking about the male being older?
I'm saying either way, irrespective of the male being older or the woman being older. I know that traditionally, that obviously the male has traditionally been older, but I've counselled many couples where it was actually the female that was a couple of years older. Again, that age gap is not very large, so it's not a significant difference. But again, if that age gap is larger, that difference tends to show more and tends to cause more issues in relationships.
Yeah, I haven't seen any statistics. I would be interested. You're going to make me go and look them up now. About that. But I totally agree with what Irini said. One thing I have noticed sometimes, though, is that for some men, not all men, but for some men, if the wife is older, and particularly if they marry when they're a bit young, the man hasn't quite matured yet, and the woman has. I mean, women tend to mature earlier than men anyway, and then you've also got the woman being a few years older. And for some men that can be a problem because they feel, I'm supposed to be the man of the house and make the decisions, and the reality is the woman has more experience and more maturity and more wisdom, so she's actually making better decisions. And that can lead to some self-doubts and, lack of self-esteem and that sort of thing in men, which can sometimes turn into very negative sort of patterns of the relationship. So I don't think that that's like necessarily a deal breaker or anything, but I think it would be very important if people are in that situation that they're aware of what could be the case and they make sure that they have a way of dealing with it, probably with help, preferably, if they can't deal with it by themselves.
Sure. Okay. So a lot of people want to know about this 7-year itch. Does it exist?
Yeah, I get asked that a little bit. I think what happens is a lot of couples, again, going back to those stages of relationships we were talking about earlier, tend to get married in that first stage of relationships, which is the romance stage. And they go through the stages that follow, such as the power struggle stage, after they get married. And sometimes those power struggle stages can last a little bit longer when both people are trapped in the same house, so to speak. They have no escape, they have no home other than their home together to go back to and reflect on and come back and resolve them. So the power struggles actually tend to lengthen a bit rather than maybe having been resolved a little bit faster if they were entering into them while they were engaged. So I think for a lot of couples who enter into a marriage while they're still in that romance stage and they face those power struggles early in their relationship, it can take quite some time for them to find that rhythm and that balance and to be able to navigate through the issues that cause those power struggles and to get to a time where they know how to argue in a healthy way, when they know how to have healthy discussions and robust discussions without necessarily going into, full-on power struggles. And I think that's when the 7-year itch comes into it. And for some people it's 7 years, for some people it's 3, for some people it's 5. But I think it comes into play when people become really tired and they feel like, oh, this is now really strange. We've kind of resolved some of our power struggles and our conflicts, and it's a little bit dull. It's a bit stable. So they start to ask questions about, is this the right relationship? Am I meant to be in this marriage? And that's where that itch, I guess, comes from. But I think it has a lot more to do with the stages of the relationship that they're still progressing through, rather than actual issues within the relationship sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. But, again, Abuna might have other experiences in that.
No, I think that's what we see. And I think the other interesting period is the empty nest stage, where a couple's brought up the kids, and now the kids are starting to go off and find their own lives, and suddenly these two people find themselves alone with each other, and they haven't been alone for the last 20 or 30 years. So I think it's really important at that stage too that couples be prepared and start to find ways of spending time together by themselves again, so that they don't suddenly find themselves with a stranger.
Very interesting. So we've got a question that's come in, and this is probably starting to become more common now that society is changing. And what Orthodox can intermarry? For example, can a Coptic marry a Greek?
Right. So obviously, I mean, you can marry. You can marry anyone. But I think what the questioner is asking is, can you marry in the Coptic Church? So the answer is, you can marry any Oriental Orthodox person without doing anything extra. So there's 6 Oriental Orthodox churches. There's us and the Armenians, Indians, Syrians, Ethiopians and Eritreans. If you want to marry a Greek or Russian or Serbian or Macedonian Orthodox person, the rules of the church at the moment say that that person needs to be joined to the Coptic Orthodox Church. We don't rebaptize them, we chrismate them, which is kind of sealing them as a member of the Coptic Orthodox Church. And then they're able to marry and have communion and partake of all the sacraments and so on. With other kinds of Christians, there are various rules depending on what their views are of whether marriage is a sacrament or not, and those kinds of things. Whether baptism is a sacrament or not, etc.
Okay. So I understand that this book kind of unites the Orthodox marriage with the Eastern and the Orthodox. Can you please explain how it does so?
Well, we've tried to write it in a way that's as kind of culturally neutral as possible. Obviously, you can never do that completely. We both come from the Coptic Orthodox tradition, and that's where our experience has mostly been. So that's how we've often phrased things. But we've tried to do it in a way that someone who's not Coptic would still be able to read it and get stuff out of it and understand it. We've also tried to highlight the similarities and the positive connections, I suppose, between the different Orthodox traditions. And I, for one, was actually surprised to find how many there are. We both call the wedding ceremony a crowning ceremony. You don't get that, I don't think, outside the Orthodox world. And it's such a beautiful thing. The idea being that in the Greek ceremony, one of the prayers actually says that your wife is now your crown. Right? So the crown that you're putting on your head actually is your wife to the husband, and the same thing to the husband, to the wife. Your husband is your crown. So, you're putting something precious on your head that makes you look wonderful, makes you look so much better than you did before you put it on your head. And that thing is your partner. That's going to make your life so much more wonderful. Another lovely thing I benefited from is apparently in the Greek tradition, the couple would continue to wear the crown for a week after the wedding ceremony. So imagine that, we're going home and you're still wearing the crown, and going to the party and you're still going shopping and you're still wearing the crown. Wouldn't that be lovely? But it's like, this is so beautiful and so precious. Like, I want to hold on to it. I don't want to let it go. So we don't have that, right? In our Coptic tradition, we don't have that. And there are things that we have in our rites and traditions that they don't have on the other side. So for me, I think this was such a wonderful exercise in how much we can benefit when we take the time to talk to each other and listen to each other and learn from each other.
One thing I like about our weddings, when we have a large crowd of Western community who don't speak the Coptic language or even Arabic, sometimes the priest would change the whole ceremony into English. And one thing I really like is he'll explain certain aspects of of that, not because he's being accommodating, because I'm actually learning a lot from listening to what he's saying. But I believe in the book you speak about our ceremonies and our...
There is a section at the end, yeah, that goes through, you know, what do the rings mean, what do the capes mean, what do the... actually explains praying the liturgy of the Eucharist. And it's a pity that people, yeah, they're like, you know, as Irini was saying earlier, they're taken up by the glamour of the day and looking at the bride's dress and the train and whatever it is that they're interested in. And they miss out on this wonderful spiritual experience.
Okay. I know it's a big topic, but what can be a take-home message?
I think, you know, I think as you mentioned earlier, the title of that, and as Abuna also spoke about that, two becoming one, that the goal of marriage is to be united to the other person and together to be united to God. And I think that's at the foundation of a healthy Christian marriage and a healthy Christian relationship. So I think that you know, in a brief nutshell, kind of encapsulates the major message of the book. But Abuna, I'm sure, can put it a lot more eloquently than I can.
No, I totally agree. I think it's such a wonderful opportunity, marriage, that it's worth investing the time and the energy to try and do it as well as you can, so that you get the most out of it that you can, as its maker intended it to be used.
I want a copy of this book. How can I do so?
Oh, we'll give you one tonight.
And our audience members, what's the best way for them to get a copy of this book?
So the ebook is available, I think, through Amazon and Ancient Faith Publishing, and they also have Crossroads Publishing here in Australia. If people, particularly in Melbourne, I believe they have a physical address that people can go and purchase. Ancient Faith Publishing.
Okay.
Have it through their website, and you can either download the ebook, or you can order it through them and get it delivered, or you can order it through Crossroads Books as well, who are based in Melbourne, I believe. So if you're in Melbourne, you can actually go in and pick one up, or if you're somewhere else in Australia, you can order it and they'll deliver it for you.
All right. And I'd like to thank you for such a lovely and insightful show. And I know myself, leading towards a marriage now, I'm definitely going to get a copy and read this book. Thank you for being on the show and Ask.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Min. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you. And thank you to our audience members who've tuned in tonight's show and sending all those lovely questions in. Remember, Ask is a live show where you have the opportunity to ask questions live and your answers will come to you straight to your phone. I'm Irini Ibrahim from your CYC studios in Sydney. Good night and God bless.
CYC, Christian Youth Channel.
I'd like to welcome you to a new series on CYC called Disciples of All Nations. St. Mary is also a beautiful example of a disciple. He became such a holy man. There is nothing said by him in the entire New Testament. Where he truly was an epitome of a disciple to the nations. My name is Father Peter Sad of St. Peter and St. Paul Coptic Orthodox Church in Montreal. I'd like to welcome you to a new series on CYC called Disciples of All Nations.
Treasures, the book of treasures, the Bible. You can be very rich studying the Bible. also enrich others by the Word of God. We will see treasures in all the books of the Bible and behind all verses. Come and enjoy the treasures of the Bible in the program of Treasures in CYC.
Women, they have very, very important part in God's plan. Be able to adopt yourself to God's purposes. The Samaritan woman Mary, Jesus' mother, she did the right decision. We are discussing women from the Bible to see which character is the best, which one to follow.
This show is all about relatable subjects and topics between the servants and the youth of the church.
The servants and the teachers aren't motivating, or they're just doing it because somebody called them to.
If you want to do something, imagine God is sitting right next to you. Would you still do that or not?